All right, folks, we are back for another edition of the Lex Lumpkin Show. This is the round one postseason edition. It's going to be a pretty short intro. There's not much to talk about that isn't already covered in all these appearances, over the course of this episode. I'll just briefly go over it, though. Of course, we are in round one of the postseason. These matchups are a total commissioner's dream, the league, all that stuff. We got Bowen versus Bowen, brother versus brother. In the first round, the 3 seed versus 6 seed, the Zits versus Go Tigers. Then we got the battle of the Titans, the battle of the heavyweights. Two teams that have been consistently ranked in the top 4. I think they both had their opportunity at the top of the power rankings at some point in the season. We got the Vibers versus Big Brain. Big Brain, the 4 seed, Vibers, the 5 seed. And then, of course, Two Pins is the 1 seed. The Bussy Boys are the 2 seed. They're waiting for the winners of these matchups in the next round. So this week we had everybody on. We had some representation from each team to some extent. Just for a quick segment, kind of go over what their team's outlook is, and then maybe a quick couple questions with them. But as always, this episode is brought to you by Sundog Multimedia. Sundog Multimedia is an online communication and social media company. They were once just a personal tool that has since evolved into something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact their lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you to help build a modern yet nimble social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional media principles. Sundog is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. You can check them out at sundog_multimedia on Instagram. That's at sundog_multimedia. Brains, brawn, and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service. Moving, muscle for hire, assembly, errands, you name it. Easy peasy is a multi-purpose team. If you need something, just ask.
Oh,
all right. We are here with Big Brain LLC, the number 4 seed, 9-5 record, second most points for. They're only 0.28 points behind the lead. That's behind Two Pins. A few things we can dive into with the scoring, right? You were exactly 1 point behind the record-setting season you had in 2020. You guys had 1,812.52 points this year. In 2020, where you guys set the league record that still stands, you guys had 1,813.52. So literally an exact point less than what you guys had in that record-setting season. But here you guys are, the 4th overall seed, the wild card team. 9-5 wasn't enough to win the division. Simcoe obviously did that. A little bit more on your scoring. You guys were actually the 3rd most efficient in terms of points for over max points for. So you guys played 87.37% of your potential points. That's behind Two Pins that played 88.63 and Go Tigers that played 91.38. Slippery Pete was right behind you guys at 86.14. And then there's actually a pretty decent drop off from there. The top 4, of course, Pete rounds it out with 86.14. The next best team was the Vibers with 83.78. I think that kind of speaks for, and that's where we can kind of bring you guys in to talk about your team. I think when you look at those top 4 teams that are kind of playing their most, those are the ones that, with the exception of Pete, I don't want to call it top heavy, but at least you kind of have your starting lineup spoken for. I don't think there are many decisions that you guys have to make outside of quarterback, I'd say right now. But for the most part, right, with your running backs and then your receivers, and of course, you guys pretty much just seem to have like one working tight end at a time. There's really not many decisions for you guys to make there, except for on bye weeks, where even then, I think you guys just slot in Valdez Scantling, Mustard Myers, Depth Piece Watkins, all those guys. So how do you guys kind of feel about that? I think that's kind of been your strategy for these last 3 years, right? You guys have been all about just stacking up as many quarterbacks as possible and then just building the most powerful starting lineup and never really seeming to care too much about depth. I don't know who wants to take the charge. I know Mitch kind of calls the shots around here, so maybe we could start with him. Mitch, how are you feeling about Big Brain's roster construction? Do you still feel like it's a winning method?
I mean, I'm no shot caller, Kieran, but yeah, it's a winning roster for sure. And I hear the the lack of depth. I mean, when you have a roster that has like our 4 running backs, it is going to like appear that we don't have depth. But I mean, we did have a solid amount of injuries to our bench. I mean, we're rolling out Michael Thomas on our bench to start the year. Coming back next year, we're going to have Goddard and Ertz both down there. I mean, must start Myers. His name speaks for himself. He's on another team. He must be starting, but there's
and that's kind of what's crazy.
I
guess I shouldn't. I guess I am kind of understating the depth a little bit because you have a guy named Must Start Myers on your bench. If you're able to do that, then you must have some pretty good depth, right?
He starts on 11 out of 12 teams.
Exactly. Exactly. He'd be most teams wide receiver 1. And here you guys are just kind of push them to the side saying, and maybe next year,
kid will get a shot someday.
So with your scoring though, right? You guys were a little low for the last 3 weeks, averaging 112.46 points per game. But in 3 of the 4 games before that, you guys did put up 150 plus. So I don't think that there's really any concerns with the slump. I would have to go and look back. I'm sure you guys had some bye week issues maybe, and that's probably somewhat of an explanation for the lower scoring to finish out the season. But, more on that depth, right? And we talked about how you guys stack up those quarterbacks. You guys have 8 quarterbacks on your roster. I think 6 of them currently have a starting job. Of course, you have Rodgers, Tannehill. Looks like you're starting Huntley this week. Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt, of course. You got Heineke. You have Brock Purdy, who's going right now. So he's out of the equation for you guys this week. And then you guys have Teddy Bridgewater, of course, a backup down in Miami. And then at running back, though, some of us call it Mount Rushmore around here. Christian McCaffrey, he is RB3. You have Nick Chubb, who is RB6. Austin Eckler, who is RB1. And then Joe Mixon, who is RB11. And then, of course, I think that's kind of where we talk about the depth a little bit. The only running backs you have behind them are Ingram and then Justice Hill. So I'd say you guys don't have backups. That's just my opinion. Ingram's on IR. I don't know. Is Justice Hill, is he on the active roster? Is he a practice squad guy for the Ravens?
Not sure.
Yeah. So,
I don't know.
But that doesn't really seem to matter, right? We're talking about your depth and it always comes up. That's always the thing with you guys. But depth really just matters in the regular season because of bye weeks. And then, just the in and outs of the regular season with injuries that come with that. Right now, you guys are just like kind of locked in, right? 3 weeks. You got to almost just cross your fingers and pray that there's no drastic injury to one of your guys now, because if you guys can lock in for 3 weeks, I think you guys have a very strong chance, right? Christian McCaffrey's been on fire in San Francisco. Nick Chubb, he's been a little cold with Watson. He's had 8 points and then 6.9. That's about 7.5 points per game with Watson at the starting quarterback. And then he does have a tough schedule coming up: Baltimore, New Orleans, Washington. It's not necessarily the easiest. Eckler, of course, has been great, and it looks like the Chargers are kind of clicking a little bit. Herbert maybe getting over that rib injury. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams coming back, opening that offense up more. Eckler is just, a constant stud week in and week out. I think the big thing, though, is that Mixon is maybe a little overrated this year, right? He's carried by that 53-point game that he had. So right now on the season, he's RB8 in points per game. That's 15.6 points per game. If you are to take out what I'd call an outlier of a 53-point game, he'd be RB21, averaging 11.89 points per game. So he hasn't necessarily been great. It looks like maybe we're seeing a little bit of aging on the running back, something like that. But it's still, for him to be your RB4, right? Even if you want to take it at that value of RB21, for that to be your 4th running back, I think you guys are still in a pretty good spot. And then the wide receivers kind of speak for themselves. Cooper and Adams in those 2 spots. And then you got Valdez-Scantling, must start, depth piece, KJ Osborne, Westbrook-Ikine. Those are reasonable, fill-ins if you really, really have to, but hopefully you guys don't reach that. And then tight end, I think, is the interesting one because Goddard, he has been activated. His practice window has been opened. So I think there's a pretty good chance if you guys can make a run, maybe not this week, but if you guys can make a run and next week and in the championship week, he might be able to come back and contribute for you guys. So maybe that deadline trade wasn't all for nothing or anything like that. But I mean, yeah, overall, it's like it's such like a strong starting lineup. Jordan, how are you feeling? We heard Mitch's thoughts, and I know that he's kind of like the dictator with you guys, and I want to give you an opportunity to speak freely. I can mute him if you want; he doesn't have to cut you off. But what are your thoughts? And I think maybe more so about the quarterback situation, right? How are you feeling? It looks like you're starting Tannehill and Huntley this week. I don't know if there's going to be a change before Sunday, but how are you feeling overall? You do have a lot of options there.
Mitch, is it all right if Jordan talks?
Yeah, may I?
Can we do a 2/3 vote on that, Jeremy? I'm good with it. If you are.
Yeah, I think that'll work. I think that works.
Mm,
So I
democracy
think we're
lies.
looking at Tannehill and Rodgers this week. Huntley possibly, but like the lineup, only question marks, as you know, are the QBs. Don't really know what you're going to get from Tannehill week to week, whether they just keep running it. Rodgers inconsistent all season. Running backs, we need a lot of points there. Mr. Nasty's kind of messed up Amari Cooper and Nick Chubb a little bit, so I'm all for sending that man to prison and starting Jacoby Brissett again. Hopefully we can get Goddard back soon, but I'm happy. We're in a good spot.
Yeah, and I did see a thing. It sounds like the Browns, they want to start taking more deep shots, this week. So maybe that opens things up. I feel like maybe that benefits Peoples-Jones a little bit more. He's more of the gunner for them. But Amari Cooper, he does kind of get those mid, and he can get some long targets as well. So that could help it. And then, obviously stretching the field could open things up for Nick Chubb. I think that's what's also interesting, and we talked about it, right? This league, all that stuff. We got the Bowen versus Bowen matchup on one side, and then we have what I say is a heavyweight matchup between you guys and the Vibers. But honestly, with all the preseason hype about the Vibers, I think you couldn't ask for a better time to catch them, right? Because they've really been slumping, and I'd say more than just the back half. I'd say the back 2/3 of the season, they've really been slumping. They just lost Kyler Murray. Jeremy, how are you feeling about this matchup with the Vibers, and then your outlook for the whole bracket? I know you're probably taking it 1 week at a time, but it's definitely tough sledding ahead with this matchup, and then you're going to have to either face Two Pins or Simcoe if you do advance. So how are you feeling with how the bracket shook out for you guys and then this first round matchup?
Well, Big Brain does a lot of media training. So obviously I gotta say we're one week at a time. So we're locked in on the Vibers right now. It is interesting that our biggest question mark throughout the season has usually been our QBs, because then we come into this week, Derek Carr is coming off a horrific week. Kyler Murray gets hurt. So I feel like if we can go even or even go up a few points in our QB slot, I think that puts us in a really good situation. So we'll see. But I think that would definitely be what I'm kind of keeping my eye on, is how does Derek Carr perform? I don't even remember who's their.
Allen?
Oh shit! So it's Josh Allen. My bad. So it's Josh Allen and Derek Carr. But we'll see how
Could be a
Derek
little
Carr
snow
does.
in that game.
What's that?
Could be a little snow up in Buffalo.
Yeah, I feel like Allen will do fine. But Derek Carr played like shit, so I'm hoping he continues to do that, except for when he throws to Devontae Adams. So we're looking for like one touchdown, 3 interception game from Derek Carr, and Devontae Adams goes like 8 for 100 and a touchdown. That would be ideal.
Yeah, I think it's definitely Paul, because I think it's always like when you're facing somebody and you have the quarterback and they have that quarterback's wide receiver, I feel like you're always the one that's kind of, they kind of have the upper hand, because all it takes is one huge play. If Devontae Adams rips off like a 40-yard touchdown, then all of a sudden he's probably going to outscore Derek Carr just because of how those points shake out, for a quarterback versus a receiver. So that definitely does make it tough. And I think the big difference for you guys from this year compared to last year, which it's even hard to say that because it's like you guys are getting so much production out of running back that it almost doesn't matter, right? Because you guys are, like I said, you guys almost beat your league best points total from 2020. So, but I think the big difference is that you're not getting that MVP play out of Rodgers, getting that top 5 guy anymore, and really kind of trying to scrape by with those 12 to 15 points. But I guess that kind of leads us to the big question, and then I can let you guys get off, and you guys can answer this however you want, because it's a big one. And if you guys want to huddle up and think about it, or maybe go one at a time, or designate a speaker, whatever works for you guys is fine. But as we're saying, Big Brain, they're known for their gaudy regular season numbers and 0 playoff success. I don't even want to say a lack. It's a total lack of success.
I'd argue we have 2 playoff wins.
What's that? What, getting to the bye?
No, the third place games.
Yeah,
that is true. That is true. You guys are locked into that third place.
If I remember correctly, too, we are absolutely pumping teams in those third place games.
Yeah, you guys have it. It's almost like you're chipping away at getting some playoff experience. It's like you're simulating playoff experience by getting those wins.
Getting our money back. And
it's like you're just getting like a couple body punches in to steal some points on a round or something. But what is it about this year's team that makes you believe you can kind of break that curse and what is the plan if things don't work out this year? Are you guys looking to just kind of truck forward with what you guys have, or do you think that maybe if things don't pan out and you guys are a first round exit again, or I should just say first game exit, since you guys weren't playing in the first round these last 2 years?
McCaffrey just scored.
Is there a sense of
Jordan.
urgency?
Go.
Is there a sense of urgency to maybe switch things up or at least reevaluate the strategy if things don't pan out and play out like they have in the past couple of years?
Fellas, if I may,
Go ahead.
even if anybody sees this in the league, I trust this league with my whole heart to make just crazy roster decisions in the months of like March, April, May, and June that so drastically upend their rosters that we just come into like September and kind of end up looking around and being like, oh, we're pretty much fine. So I think that's where, even if we don't win this year, I think we will hibernate for as long as possible. See if Zach has a single player left on his team come next fall, and then kind of pick up the pieces from there.
Anybody else, or does that kind of speak for everybody?
Yeah,
No,
I mean, if our sights are on a championship. If we don't win it, just keep rolling back the Mount Rushmore. See what happens.
Yeah, and I will say, for what it's worth, I've been asking around the league and seeing what everybody thinks, and it really seems to be the public consensus is between you guys and Two Pins. I feel like nobody's, and maybe that's
It's Ryan's year.
Yeah, maybe that's a reason we should all be betting Simcoe because he's kind of flying under the radar as a 2 seed. But at the same time, I will say, just looking at what you guys have, the schedule moving ahead, how you guys have been playing, I was saying this before the season. I think that you guys almost want to get out of the spotlight of the last couple of years, right? Everybody was so focused on Big Brain going into the postseason the last 2 years. Now all of a sudden you guys are the 4 seed. You have to play in the first round. You have to kind of earn your way back, or you're not even back, earn your way into the championship. And I think that this is the time to maybe hop on that bandwagon because it's like nobody's looking Big Brain anymore. You guys aren't viewed as like the big bad wolf. You guys are just kind of treated as like another team. Nobody's constantly shitting on you besides Bowen or anything like that. So right now, for what it's worth, Big Brain's my pick. I'm switching opposite. Simcoe can get out of here.
Wow.
I'm on Team Big Brain. I think that is the best possible timeline for me as well. I think that if you guys win, I was just saying to Zach, I do need a Mikey Bowen win in this first round because I need, I need you guys versus Simcoe, take him down, get me that 8th pick, get me that 10th pick. Big Brain winning is perfect for me. It gives me the best possible draft capital I can get. So I'm putting all my stock in Big Brain. That's who I'm riding out with. You heard it here first on the Lex Lumpkin show.
All right, and Christian McCaffrey just scored a touchdown, so that's kind of the perfect place to stop, right? We're off to the races.
Yeah, well, I will like to add, I believe this is the first playoffs that we have McCaffrey playing in. Am I right with that?
I think so, yeah.
I think that's, probably right because I think he only played like 30% of games with Matt Rule or something.
Yeah, we have full running back health this year, which hasn't happened.
Oh,
one thing I do want to add to
definitely knock on wood for that.
Kieran, that thing you were saying about I was like, well, no way we like scored the same amount of points as that.
Yeah, is there an extra week this year?
Yeah, we got that extra.
That
week.
is a good point. That is.
I was like, no, I was trying to figure that out. I was like, all right, that makes more sense because
now we're kind of like the Cooper Cup versus Calvin Johnson thing, where it's like, if you start breaking these records, it's like, how can you really, it's one extra game, you got to like smash the record. So that is a good point.
Cooper Cup is better though.
Debatable. Racist. I think that covers everything that I had to ask. I think we've covered everything, right? I mean, it's like, and that is the big point. Just to reiterate what I was saying earlier, it's like the depth really it matters so much more for the long haul of the season. But now it's like you guys just have to hope that in this 3-week span, your roster can just lock in, stay healthy. And as long as you guys stay healthy, I think you have just as good a shot as anybody outside of maybe Two Pins. I think that you guys are kind of viewed as the 2 favorites just based off of, just going off the numbers, right? Going off of the points for, going off of the scoring output, everything like that. So it's like, of course, injuries can derail anybody. And as Mitch pointed out, it's like you guys didn't have McCaffrey last time. I think you guys traded for Chubb from me last year, right? How the hell did you guys get Chubb? Who were the running backs last year you guys had?
Do we don't have to rehash the whole Kelsey trade again, do we?
Oh, that's right. That's right. The old Kelsey trade. But yeah, so Big Brain LLC, the 4 seed, they're going up against the Vipers right now. It's looking like a good start for them with how Christian McCaffrey's playing in this Thursday night game. Thank you guys for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and we will have the playoff teams that advance on next week. So it would be nice to see you guys. I'm wishing you guys the best of luck.
I'll wear a
Hope to
Santa
see you-
hat.
Thanks for having the brain.
Hope to see you then, Lex Lumpkin.
Thanks for having us. We look forward to having the commission.
All right, we're going. We got the Viber. We have Congo Cash, Talon Wayne Gomes,
Yes,
co-owner of the Occasional Vibers,
Yes, sir.
here to talk about their first round matchup. So, of course, it's you, it's Igor managing the team.
Mhm.
I feel like you've kind of been like the public face of the team. You know, you're not
Yes.
afraid to get in the mud, talk some shit, do all that. Igor's kind of like the GM, right? You're kind of like the Bob Kraft. And then Igor's
Exactly.
kind of like the Bill Belichick coach and GM, where he's kind
I'm
of
the Bob Kraft. You mean that in the sense that I just I get a lot of massages to get jerked off.
and you wear the shirts with the French cuffs and everything. That's just your swag, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Just making
So
sure we
you
had a
know
comparison.
we're recording this on Sunday, so your matchup has actually started. You guys were originally projected to lose, but because of Josh Allen, you guys have actually catapulted yourself above Big Brain right now. You guys are projected right
Right.
now going into this Sunday matchups to win by 13 points. You know, I'm sure you keep up with everything, but just for the people watching at home, I'm just going to run through your team real quick.
Mhm.
So, you know, of course, you guys, your strength was always the supreme depth, right? It was, you guys were loaded at running back, loaded at receiver. Of course, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, that's an elite duo for super flex with the quarterbacks. But
Right.
the depth can always be a blessing and a curse, right? Because sometimes, like, you get the teams like Big Brain and Two Pins where their lineup kind of speaks for themselves. They don't have to decide, should I start this guy in the flex or this guy, whatever. And, you know, what they have is what they get. But you guys kind of get screwed sometimes where you might start, say, a guy like Mike Williams, but then all of a sudden he has a
Right.
bad game. And then you got
Right.
Florin, you got Gabe Davis, you know, you got all these guys on the bench that might be going off. So it kind of is killer right there. But at the same time, I think you guys have also benefited from that with Javonte Williams going down. Now Kyler's going down. You got Derek Carr that can step right in. So the depth that it is, it's a blessing and a curse. And I think for the most part, it's actually helped you guys.
It's decisions to make.
What's that?
I said it creates decisions to be made. Whereas if you're a bum ass nigga with a bum ass team and you have 5 good fucking players, the decision is made for you. You lock it in. You don't miss out on anyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's like real managers know. And, you know, and for what it's worth, right, there's 4 teams at the top when it comes to the points for and then the max points for. So, like, what they could have gotten versus what they actually got.
Yeah.
And the top 4 teams are all teams that are like that, where they don't really have the depth, but they're either top heavy or, in Slippery Pete's case, he just didn't really have many players to start to begin with. So
Wait,
he almost had to start his optimal lineups.
in whose case?
What's that?
In whose case?
Slippery Pete. But you know, but like with you guys though, you guys were actually 5th in the league. So it's like for all the depth and everything, you guys were still starting pretty optimal lineups. And there's a little bit of a tier break after those top 4. But once you get to those teams that actually had decisions to make, you guys were clearly the best at it. You know, you guys were the early season favorites, and I think it was because of that depth. And you guys were never outside of that top 4. The top 4 was always pretty interchangeable to begin with. But you guys definitely fell off a little bit to end the season, or I shouldn't even say to end the season. Really, so weeks 1 through 5, you guys were averaging 142.5 points per game. Week 6 on, so weeks 6 through 14, you guys averaged 109.67. That's about a 33 point drop off.
What is the oh shit? What is the average drop? Because once the bye week start, right?
Yeah.
There's usually, you know, a little bit of a drop off in points.
Yeah, and I guess that makes sense too, right? Because the bye weeks, they start what? Is it still week 4? It might be week 5 now, just because of the
I know
the
it's right
extra week.
around that time where our drops start. Well, now obviously ours is bigger than, you know, just the natural way of things, but oh fuck, I just threw out my unlimited mimosa cup. Anyways,
But I mean, so you guys have been carried though. You guys were carried by the quarterbacks for sure. Even Josh Allen, it felt like he was having a shitty season. He was still a top 3 quarterback in terms
yeah,
of
it's just
points.
because coming into the year, people expected Josh Allen to just be like him. Clearly, not well. They were talking about this nigga like, oh yeah, no, he's better than Mahomes.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but people had a lot of opinions. There was like, yeah, oh, Josh Allen, yeah, he's better than Mahomes. It's like, nigga, Let's relax.
I
That's
think
my
we're
guy.
seeing
You
it
know,
now with like the dumb interceptions, and it's like he doesn't take care of himself. It's like he's clearly up there, but I think it's just
Right.
like Mahomes until further notice, he's like in a tier of his own.
Exactly. You have to default him. I don't care if Peyton Manning has, a couple seasons in a row better than Tom Brady. You know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, we know what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, even things it's like, I think we've talked about it before, but it's like with Josh Allen, like his inability to just like hit the deck and slide, like it feels like we're kind of on like that Cam Newton type trajectory where all of a sudden
Yeah.
he's going to be 30, 31, and it's like, oh yeah, it's like he's got a bum shoulder, his knee isn't right, his foot will never be fully healed, that type of thing. And it does make it definitely worrisome, but at the same time, it is just crazy to watch him, and like the fact that like he'll just take off, and like he had like a 50-yard run yesterday. It was like, what the hell is he doing?
Yeah, he's
It's
dumb.
crazy, like his ability to do that stuff. So it's like until the time being, you guys are still like, absolute supreme. Like it's like you and then George and Joe when it comes to that quarterback depth, because they have Mahomes and they have Herbert as well. But Kyler Murray going down, it came at a really bad time for.
They got the Instagram quarterback.
Yeah, yeah, the social media, Emmanuel Acho's boy.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like, so Kyler's torn ACL though came at such a bad time for you guys because one, you're heading into the postseason. You would love to have him there, but then also it came at a point where it sounds it's almost too optimistic to think that he's going to be back for any meaningful time next year, right? Because it's like at least like a 9-month injury. So it's like now we're looking at, okay, maybe he can be healthy for the start. Maybe he can be back for the second half. But then also Arizona's just like a total mess down there now, right? It's
a mess.
I saw today that it looks like they're going to be looking for a new GM. I feel like that probably means that Kingsbury's done, because it's like if they end the season like this anyways, how can you bring Cliff back, right? I mean, it's like
I honestly don't mind. I don't mind Cliff getting out of there. I'm not a Cliff hater. I know there's a lot of those. But also just you see Kyler year after year, and I mean he hasn't taken that leap yet that a lot of people were kind of like certain he was going to take. And don't get me wrong, like, I love his game. I think he's his raw talent is unbelievable. I think he's a better quarterback than a lot of people give him credit for. It's weird. Have you noticed there was like the Kyler camps have gone like they've gone so polar. Have you noticed that?
Oh yeah.
Like, so I'm still one of the few people that's kind of rational about Kyler Murray, where it's like, yeah, like I don't think he's like the next big thing, but I also don't think that's an impossibility. You know what I'm saying? And it's like a lot of people think he's straight up ass. Like, so basically, I'm saying I don't mind Cliff getting out of there because something can be refreshed, especially in Kyler's favor.
Yeah, I think for them, it's like they really just need like a complete overhaul. It's like get Cliff out of there, get the GM out of there. That might even make it time to trade like DeAndre Hopkins or something, just like still get something and kind of start fresh. Like
now,
they got Hollywood, they're going back to the Oklahoma connection and everything. It's like you have these young pieces, and it's something I've been kind of saying all year because we've been so spoiled by the guys like the Jeffersons and the Chases and everybody that you want everybody to like succeed right away. And I think Kyler also is kind of like a victim of his own early success where he was so good right away that all of a sudden, right, he's still 25, like he's still young. And I think that was the big criticism with him early on was like, he's not a good leader. It's like, yeah, but like, he's like, at the time he's like 22, 23, and you're asking him to lead, a group of men that are older than him, bigger than him, veterans, all this stuff.
And you know what's crazy? You know what's crazy? If they were winning games, not due to like, say he did exactly what he did.
Yeah.
If they were winning games at a high clip regularly, maybe because he's leaning a little bit on the defense, or maybe because he's leaning a little bit on the run game, something that isn't directly him, the leader conversation would never happen. He could come out with the same production he has had in his entire career and win games because of other facets of the game, and the leader conversation would never fucking come up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but like you were saying too, it's like you just look at him play, and it's like his arm talent is legitimately insane. Like he has legit Major League Baseball arm talent.
Right.
And I think people, nobody forgets that he was, first round pick and everything. And he was really had to make a decision between baseball and football and everything. I don't think people forget that, but I think people forget that like he was drafted to Major League Baseball for a reason. Like he's a sick athlete. The way that he runs and like his ability to get out of the pocket, his ability to throw from different arm angles, all that stuff, it's insane. So it's like, he has all the things.
He has all the things that GMs nut over.
Yeah, and it's like, we see all these guys where it's like, people compare Bryce Young to him, like because he's a smaller guy and all that stuff. But it's like
Is there another
Kyler
reason
Murray
why
is
do
like,
that?
what's that?
Is there another reason why they might compare them to?
Well, and that's the thing, right? It's like so many people
Hey,
just
ask
look
Slippery
at it
Pete.
and be
Hey,
like,
ask Slippery Pete.
oh,
Ask
oh,
Slippery
he
Pete.
looks like this for this reason or that reason or whatever reason, right? And they go, oh, it's like the same thing. It's like, what is it like?
Ask Slip-
You white, you Matt Damon, like that type of thing. It's like,
You black, you Mike Vick.
so it's
Ask
like,
Slippery Pete.
it's like if you put them next to each other, it's like Kyler Murray's like, hey, he's got like 20 more pounds on him, and it's like solid muscle mass, like
Right.
built completely different. And that's not like, I don't want to like, that's not really like a knock. Like I think Bryce Young is probably a better pocket quarterback than Kyler Murray is. But it's like the ability, it's like, when people talk about, oh, he can run, like, when people ask like, oh, is Bryce Young going to have longevity with how small he is and the injuries, people will be like, well, Kyler Murray does. It's like, look at how Kyler Murray is built. He can take those hits. And,
Right.
not to say that Bryce can't, but I don't think it's comparable. And I think Kyler Murray, like, I think Caleb Williams is truly like the next Kyler Murray. And I mean, they literally look exactly the same. And then they're Lincoln Riley products anyways. And the way that they're playing.
Biracial.
Yeah.
No, I don't know if
I
you're
was
talking
thinking,
shit.
right?
No, but
But what
Oh,
if you weren't able to get on the call? I was like, well, what if all of a sudden you open up the episode and it's me just like in complete blackface, like just doing a one-on-one interview? It would be like some Howard Stern, like some OG Howard Stern shit. Like,
yo, I'm fucking. Or the what's it called? What do they call the King of Canada? What is that? What the fuck is that? You
Who
seen
is
his blackface, haven't you?
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Prime Minister. Yeah, have you seen his? He has some of the best blackface I ever seen in my fucking life.
Have you ever seen the clip? It was Norm was on some radio show and it was like, they asked him to like, it was like a role playing type thing, like talk yourself out of this situation. So it's like you're having sex with a girl and then her big black boyfriend walks in. It's like, what do you do? And he just goes, hey, Job Turkey, let's kill this honky bitch.
Hey, little does he know it's RG3, and he goes, "Let's get these chicken foods." You damn
RG3 had a
right.
tweet yesterday too. It was like something, or it was just like another like, what in the, and then he like said some word. I don't even remember what he said. And but he was talking about like how cold it was or something. And it's like, Robert, just put the phone down. Like, just give it up.
Yo,
Because
yeah,
now it's almost like he's trying to be like, this is how I talk. I always talk
Yeah.
like that.
yeah. What's good, player? That's RG3. That nigga
He's
RG3
unbelievable.
trying to show up to the next broadcast like this.
He's gonna walk in dressed like crime time.
yeah. That nigga's about to say, "Yo, hey, that pass was friggity fresh."
Hey, you'll have like the one jean leg rolled up with the bandana tied around the knee. Like,
Niggas about to just show up smoked out, fucking with a 40 in his
yeah,
hand.
like when people get like tendonitis in the knee, they tie like the thing like right around like the tendon. It's like he just does that with like a red bandana. He's like, well, yeah, this is how I just keep my knee intact,
Oh, what do you mean? I've been doing this for years. Oh, shit.
All right, so I've been doing like 10-15 minutes with everybody, so I don't want to run too long. But
Let's run long. Let's run long. What else? Let's break down another position.
All right, so the big thing I think is probably your running backs, right? Because you guys had this crazy running back depth.
Yeah,
but then you
that
kind of
got
look
fucked.
at it, and it's like I think it's been pretty underwhelming coming in because you guys made the big trade for Fournette, and
Yeah.
he's just been, maybe there was some truth to the out of shape rumors and all that stuff because he's not producing like he was last year.
He
He's
did admit
only-
it. Did you see he admitted it?
No, I don't think I did see that.
He was on Bussin' and he said something about they asked him about it and he I don't remember what his response was, but it was basically like, yeah. Basically just like, yeah, I've been eating. So but anyway.
Speaking of that Bustin' interview though, he's made me like love Foster Moreau just because of how he says his name. He's like, oh, Foster? That's my boy.
Foster.
But so you
Yeah,
guys had
it's all
Fournette,
time
but he's like also, so he's been not producing the same. He's also losing snaps to Rashad White. Guys like Kareem Hunt, Cam Akers, James Cook, they've been kind of underwhelming. James Cook has been turning it on these past couple games, but Kareem Hunt's been like an absolute zero pretty much. He has not been a startable player. Cam Akers is just, he's been kind of bouncing in and out of the lineup with the Rams. Took that leave of absence. He came back. It seems like he's kind of getting back into it, at least the fact that they let Darrell Henderson go and kept him, I guess, was a positive. But then even like Mostert, right? Mostert went off last night, and he could be a huge reason as to why you guys advance if you guys do advance, just because of that game.
You mean Raheem, fastest player on his team, Mostert?
That's what's so underrated about him. It's and that always comes up with him anyways, but it's like I feel like people still don't truly appreciate how fucking fast he is. Like
He's stupid.
yeah, like the way he took off, he had one run down the sideline where it's like it felt like the tackler was always like a foot away from him, and it's like, why are you not just like pushing him? It's like because he just kept like tiptoeing down the line. It was like just out of reach. They just like couldn't reach him. It was so crazy, but it's like he turned it on when it really mattered most for you guys, because that was one of my notes saying how he's been pretty shaky for the most part outside of some games, and then of course week 1 of the playoffs he just has like 130 yards and goes off.
It's stupid. I mean, Raheem Mostert pre-injury, which I guess you could say which one, but like healthy Raheem Mostert, the dick riding was about to begin. I don't know if you remember this narrative, but niggas was giving Mostert media slop for it was about to start, and then that kind of did. You saw what happened. But.
Yeah, but that's the thing I was talking about with like Bowen last night, and I was saying it's like when he is like on the field, he is genuinely nasty. Like he has always been good, and then it's always just derailed by like a hamstring or like a groin or something. And or what was it, groin? Remember Austin Rivers saying that online? He's like,
I was about to say growing.
There's like a sect of people that genuinely say that though. Like that's not the only time I've heard.
No, I had heard it again too. It's the same niggas that say Salmon. It's fucking. Yeah. Go ahead and do it.
The one on the Raiders, it was the Jonathan Abram.
Abram, yeah.
And they actually ended up cutting him. He was like a first round pick. They cut him this year, I think. He's on like
because then he popped his shoulder out like twice, and then he came back and hasn't been that guy.
Yeah, and I think he kind of just sucked. Like I think his big thing was like he was so physical. And I remember when they did the Hard Knocks for the Raiders, and it's like they had to tell him, it's like, dude, like stop trucking people at training camp. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? Like, I think he's just kind of like a dickhead like that, where it's like he do that shit. Then he's doing the what? What do you mean it's not pronounced salmon? Like.
He's like the nigga in freshman week that was really out there to break like 14-year-olds' legs, and it was like, nigga, like I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you need to relax. But then what's that?
It was like, but yeah, I guess Salmon. I found out Salmon's kind of a regional thing. I didn't know that. I thought you were just fucking it up, but I guess it's. I guess some people. I don't know. Being down here, I've noticed. I've heard it a few times from fucking waiters and waitresses. So
Southern education. That's but then I think the big pickup for you guys has been Zonovan Knight. So since you guys have gotten him, I think you guys didn't have him for the Chicago game, so it's been 2 games with him so far. This would be week 3. He's gotten you 14.3 and 14.7, and that's a pretty big pickup. I mean, you guys, I tried to get him, and I bid all my fab, and you guys literally outbid me by 1 fab. I don't know, it blew my mind. That you guys somehow sniffed that out. But
Igor's like that, bro. Igor's like that.
I know. And that's what's funny is that whenever he makes those claims, it shows up as you making the claim. So so you actually get credit for all the moves.
Well, I mean, listen, I can say for one, this team wouldn't exist if I didn't exist.
It is true though. That is true. All right, and then let's see what else we got. I mean, and then receiver, of course, right? AJ Brown, absolute beast. Gabe Davis, he's a little up and down, and he definitely is a big boom candidate, but it's kind of been, on the lower side this year.
Gabe Davis is oh my fucking God. What's that nigga's name?
Who?
Bucks, Boomer Bust guy. Nasty, 1,000 yards every year.
Mike Evans?
Yeah, he's Mike Evans light. That's what he's going to be for his career, as far as the Boomer Bust goes.
I was like amazed because I was kind of like a Gabe Davis hater coming into the season. Not necessarily a hater. I just thought he was a little overvalued, right? Because it was like his value was like completely coming from that one
what
playoff.
That 5 touchdown game, 4 touchdown game.
Because coming off of that, it's like, he had 4 touchdowns against the Chiefs in the playoffs. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, "Oh, is Gabe Davis a top 15 dynasty asset?" Shit like that. I was like, "All right, let's pump the brakes a little bit." It's like literally the week before that, they played the Pats. He had like 1 catch for like 2 yards.
Right.
And I was like, and that 4 touchdown game didn't even count for any fantasy points. It was in the playoffs. But
exactly.
but he's also 23, and I think the one thing that really stood out to me was when they played the Rams week 1 this year. I was like, holy shit, he's like jacked. Like he's like big as fuck. And you know,
he's quick too. He's quick too.
Yeah, like and it's like that physicality, and that I actually do like that Mike Evans comparison, just because it's like that's what Mike Evans is so good at, right? Is like, you know, he might not be like the sharpest route runner, he might not be the fastest guy, but he's so good in that in the red zone, especially specifically in the end zone, because he can box those guys out. He's athletic enough to do it. He's got the hands for it. So it's like, you know, it's still early on, and I think he can continue to develop into something big. I mean, even now he's putting up a wide receiver 26 season. So you know, early on, like that's definitely a good sign. You guys also have Terry McLaurin. You got Mike Williams coming back. That's been a huge addition for you guys, I think. You know, 20.6 points last week. And you know, I mean, even, you know, Juju Smith-Schuster has been pretty good, you know, with the Chiefs. And then, I mean, it kind of cuts off there, but it's like, you know, that's plenty enough to fill out your lineup. And
exactly.
And then of course you guys are carried by the excellent tight end play of Travis Kelce, who I think has already, he's already passed his total from last year. He was tight end number 2 last year with 216.8. He's already through 13 games at 216.9. So
well, that's
already
one of the
topped
things
last season. He's going to continue to do that. I mean, he's unbelievable. And, you know, people always talk, oh, you know, he's old and all this stuff, but the way that he plays, right, he's not going to go out early like Gronk did, because he's not physical. I mean, he's a bitch, right? I mean, he plays wide receiver. he doesn't want to get in there.
Really, I have a theory that he wants to be light skinned so bad that he's just trying to play into all the stereotypes. That's what I think. But no,
what's so funny is like the difference between him and his brother. Like his brother is like, you know, I mean, obviously a nasty fucking center, but he's like a redneck, like just like
Morgan Wallen fan.
Yeah, and it's like two completely different people. It's like there's no way you guys were raised in the same household.
Right. Well, it just comes down to the fact that Travis Kelce has a black scent, but it passes because he's dating a black woman. So it's like, all right, give a little, take a little. So. But the thing with Travis Kelce, I saw coming into the year, a lot of like the fantasy heads, you know, there was the age concerns and the this and the that. And they're like, yeah, I know they don't have the receiving core that they did. And they brought in some new guys, and, you know, he's still going to be the security blanket for Mahomes. But, you know, do you want to take the risk with that age? Do you think it's really going to be that? I'm like, nigga, yes. Like, what do you mean? Like,
this is the thing. It's like I can understand like a slight concern with like, all right, teams don't have to game plan against Tyreek Hill anymore. Maybe they can focus more on Kelce and things like this. Like, what do you think? Mahomes, after all these years, is going to stop throwing to him? Like,
right, exactly. The volume is going to be there. If nothing else, the volume will be there.
Yeah, and then you look at guys like I think Tony Gonzalez is a good comparison for him, because it's like Tony Gonzalez was able to be a productive tight end like receiver like through his late 30s. Like he was like 38 and putting up good seasons. So it's like, you know, even if he's not tight end 1 as like a 36-year-old, if he's tight end 5 or 6 or something, is that really so bad? I mean, you know, especially with how thin that position is right now, it's like I'll take whatever the hell I can get. And the fact that he's still putting up these elite numbers, and like there's no reason, like right now it looks like it's going to take like a serious injury for that to stop. And, you know, knock on wood, you know, I'd never root for that or anything, but it's like, you know, like there's no reason to believe that it's going to stop. And it's one of those, you just got to kind of ride them until the wheels fall off. And you know, so you guys are in a really good position with like kind of these building blocks that you guys have. So I mean, you guys are putting together this good start for the week, right? You guys now have that early lead up on Big Brain going into these Sunday games. And then, you know, of course, it'll suck, you know, kind of trying to figure out where Kyler's going to go. But you guys are also set up with some draft picks, too. You got George's first rounder, you got a third rounder, and then you have all the 24 and 25 picks as well. You're going to have Javonte Williams coming back at some point. Cortland Sutton is out. That's somebody I left out of there. And, you know, he hasn't really taken off like people expected him to. But I think that has a lot to do with the coaching and then the play of Russell Wilson.
Yeah, that whole offense is a fucking joke right now. I don't expect anyone to boom in that at the moment. So
yeah, like there's no reason to like hold it against anybody for not going off when Russell Wilson a couple weeks ago had like 8 touchdowns on the season, and Peyton Manning had, what was it, 7 in his first game in Denver. It's like they got to get a new coach. Nathaniel Hackett, it's not working out there. I don't think Russell Wilson is quite dead. I do think that he just needs some coaching and everything. And
I believe the injury. I believe
therapy and figure out why people don't like him. But yeah, I mean, you know, I wouldn't give up on any of you guys either. And the fact that Cortland Sutton is like your wide receiver 5 or 6, I mean, it just shows how good that depth is. But yeah, I mean, you guys are like plenty set up to make a deep run right now. You guys are plenty set up to make a run in the future. But I guess we'll wrap it up now because I actually got to get back to work.
I need to
Hey,
get
I
another
got-
mimosa, so it's the same thing.
Yes. So, with such high hopes and expectations coming into, and then for a chunk of the season, you guys still ended up as a 5 seed. But of course, you guys are still poised to make a pretty good run, right? It was more by default of, the 3 division winners and everything. Like, you guys aren't the 5th best team or anything. You guys are still definitely in that top 4, and the argument can be made that you guys are the best. But with Kyler Murray's injury, the tough first round matchup, how are you feeling right now? And if how do you plan on maybe getting more involved in the future? Or do you kind of think that these roles are working right now with, like you said, where you're kind of like the Bob Kraft owner and Igor is the GM and the coach, that type of thing. So first part is, how are you feeling right now going into this matchup? And then second part is, how do you feel about that strategy? And do you think that you're going to continue to roll with that in years moving forward?
So you know me long enough. If you ask me how I'm feeling about something that I'm biased towards, I mean, yes, like nigga.
Yeah, go ahead, because it just so you know, it's you versus Big Brain. So Jeremy, Mitch, and Jordan. So if you want to talk your shit, go ahead. You can say whatever
Fuck
the hell
them
you
niggas.
want.
That's what nigga. Fuck them. I saw Jeremy like last week. Nah, I was just gonna make shit up. He's doing great. I love Jeremy. I love all them niggas, but they lack that dog. None of them got the dog that me and Igor got. Like, it's different. Like, when we put them niggas out there, like when we make these lineups, when we set these lineups, when we discuss these rosters, nigga, it's different. It's different. And we put our heart in this shit. That's why we are where we are right now. So if you ask me about my confidence level, sure, they're analytics motherfuckers. Fuck that. I need that dog. And that's what we got. That's why we are where we are.
Yeah, and that's the thing with them
Look
too.
at the
Is
name,
like,
Big Brain, nigga. Fuck that. I'm an occasional viber. I pop in, vibe, and I pop out. Like, nigga, I'm in. Like, I vibe. If the vibes are strong, they're always strong. That's why I'm occasional. I only gotta provide it in doses, and niggas know what time it is. Regarding the roles, I was planning on getting more involved this season actually, but then I ended up joining 4 redrafts. I was peer pressured into like 2 of them. So that kind of threw that off. Next season, I do plan on maybe doing like 1 redraft, probably get pressured into another one. But I want to keep that low so I can get more involved in this league because, it's a dynasty. So I got plenty of fucking time to dig my heels in. So to answer that question, yes, I'm still going to have, at this point, Igor's got the vision. I trust in his abilities. And so I'm definitely going to, still defer. But I do want to make sure that I'm, I got my pulse in this motherfucker.
yeah, that's I think that the dynamic works out well because Igor is kind of a veteran in the dynasty game, so it's like
Exactly.
kind of like because that's the thing. You see a lot of guys, they start out and they just make maybe some irrational moves or maybe too quick to make a trade, or they don't know that they should be kind of waiting on somebody to develop or something. And having Igor to almost be a guide for that and kind of keep you guys just at like an even level and not to overreact to anything. I think that really
Right.
is helpful. So yeah, that's the thing too, though, is like,
Wait, what are
I
you
started
saying about?
cutting down
Wait,
on
what are
my
you
leagues.
implying? What are you implying?
What?
That Igor keeps it even kill and that I'm prone to overreaction.
hey, you're reading between the lines. You said it, not me. But yeah, I've kind of done the same thing though. I've tried to cut down on my leagues. I do like 1 serious redraft league. That's like my brother and his friends. It's a big money league, that type of thing. That's like the only one. And then we have like a fun league, like a free league with like Simcoe's family and everything. And then it's just this league, and then I have 1 other dynasty where it's like, if my team didn't end up being so nasty, I'd be long gone from that. But I got to try and win this championship now. Yeah. So the thing you were saying though about Big Brain, right? I asked them too how they were feeling because they're pretty infamous now for flopping in the first round. They've had these dominant regular seasons, gotten the top seed,
They're analytics.
first round bye.
They look at the books. Fuck the books. That's why you don't win if you don't. But anyway.
Yeah, and so they get that first round bye, and then they haven't. So they've got the first round bye every time, and they've never won a playoff game. They lose in that second round every time, and they're just happy with because 3rd place. There's the 3rd versus 4th place matchup. At the end of the postseason, 3rd place just gets their money back, so they get their $75 back, and they've shown that they're pretty just content with doing that and pretty much playing this league for free. And then I asked them, what would happen, if because they're so heavily built around these running backs, right? McCaffrey, Eckler, Chubb, Mixon, and then they have Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, like they're very top heavy. So I said, if you guys don't win this matchup and you guys, have a first round flop again, are you guys gonna maybe take a different approach to the strategy, maybe start trading off some of these guys and trying something different. And they were like, oh yeah, we'll probably wait and see and let everybody make trades. And then sometime around August, we might do something. It's like, like I said, they're just content with getting their third place money and
There's
continuing
no
to play
urgency.
for
There's
free.
no dog.
Yeah, and that's why, I think we're seeing it now early on in this matchup, right? You get Josh Allen putting up 36 points, you get Raheem Mostert going for 130 total yards, that type of thing. It's like you guys have that dog in you that it's like, it's gonna lift you up. It doesn't matter what the projections are, it doesn't matter what the seeding is, anything like that. So I think we're really seeing that difference right now, and it's gonna be interesting to see how it plays out on this Sunday. But that's all I got for you. I don't know if you got any closing statements.
No, I mean, we know what I think is gonna happen in this matchup. And we know how I feel about my team at this point. The rest of the league will be put on notice. I feel like niggas don't really talk shit about the Vibers, and I think it's because they know, where we stand. We come out here to play ball. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, it's like a level of respect with the Vibers. It's like we just know. It's like, there's no reason to hate. They're just
right,
doing what they
really
got to do, and they're grinding away.
exactly. And I don't, I feel I've been more respectful in this league than I've been at other times. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm searching for a chip on my shoulder, but I really, I just think we're out here to play ball and see what happens. We'll put niggas on notice if they need to be put on notice. But yeah, man, I'm excited.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Talon Gomes, co-owner of the Occasional Vibers, 5 seed coming into this playoffs. They're playing Big Brain this week. I'm hoping to have the teams that advance. I'm hoping to have them on next week, kind of do something like this every week for each round. I mean, it's only 3 rounds anyways, but
Without a doubt.
So wishing you the best of luck, and it would be a pleasure to have you back on. Maybe we'll get you and Igor if you guys do advance.
Yeah, that'd be tight.
Yep. All right. Thank you for coming on, big bro.
All right, my boy.
Yep. I'll be talking to you.
Later.
Peace. All right, we're going. All right, we got Mikey Bowen here. One half of the ownership for Go Tigers. Josh Winsper could not make it. We were just here to talk about his first round matchup. So we got Bowen versus Bowen. I feel like these first round matchups were kind of just given to us from the gods, right? We got the brother matchup and on one side, and then we have Big Brain and Vibers and the heavyweight matchup on the other side. So I think it makes for some good television. I think we're all really excited, even those of us that aren't in the playoffs. We're all very excited to see how this kind of plays out. So I think your team's an interesting case here because you are the 6th seed, but you were so close to being the 3 overall seed. You were, of course, 1 win away from clinching the division. And that would have changed. I guess that wouldn't have changed much for you anyways, because you probably would be facing Zach regardless. But that could change your seeding because we do reseed going into the next round anyways. So, maybe in some scenarios that could have changed how things played out for you, just if you were to win in advance anyways. But your team's been pretty hot down the stretch. And even when you were hanging on to that 6 seed and the 3 seed was looking so unlikely, you were the one that was most comfortable in a playoff spot because it was either you won the division, or if you didn't, you had the 6 seed pretty solidified for the last month or so of the season. So you've kind of been sitting pretty where I think your brother and in the Zits, they've kind of been hanging on by a thread of that division lead, because if they fell out of that, they possibly could have fallen out of the entire playoff. So I think going in, you're perceived as the favorite. I think you're like a slight favorite right now. Of course, that could change if T. Higgins can't go, and we could talk about that in a second. But I think you're like a 3-point favorite going into this matchup right now. I do think people around the league view as the stronger team just based off of current status, not necessarily, stronger overall. I think just based off of, the injuries that have happened to Zach's team and just kind of how your team's been going. We can kind of look at that though, because, I think last year, of course, you were the runner up. You lost the 2 pins in the finals, but you were really heavily carried by your running backs, right? Najee was such an instant hit for you with that 4th overall pick. Elijah Mitchell was, burst onto the scene as the, late rounder that took over in that Niners backfield. Mitchell, you haven't really had him for any of the season. He was injured in week 1, and then he was re-injured later on when he came back. He looked decent when he came back, but even then it was going to be shaky because the Niners already had McCaffrey at that point. Najee, I think, is the more interesting one in your backfield, just because last year, right, you look at it and he was such, I know Zach and we've criticized him a lot just because he's kind of, you could call him a volume merchant and that type of thing. And Last year he averaged 23.59 carries and targets a game. That was 2021. This year he's averaging about 6 less at 17.46, and that's kind of showing in his points per game as well. Last year he was top 5 back, averaging 15.5 points per game. Now with the less volume, he's averaging 11 points per game. I think he's still like number 15 on the running back rankings, but that's a 4-point drop, and over 14 weeks that does add up. And then your running backs too, your other bench running backs, Melvin Gordon, Marlon Mack, Darrell Henderson, Benjamin, they all kind of flashed at points. I mean, Marlon Mack didn't really flash much except for last week. He had that huge reception, but these are all guys that, had really good opportunity for, some good touches at some point in the season. They've actually all been cut from their rosters at some point. And, they're winding up on different places now, but they're not really fantasy viable. You're hoping that maybe Melvin Gordon could come off of the practice squad for Kansas City, or Marlon Mack and maybe build off of that long reception that he had, or Darrell Henderson. And I don't know, seems like kind of gone with him now. And even Benjamin, right? It's like he looks so good in Arizona, and then he was cut, and then he's picked up by the Texans, and it's like, what the hell's going on there?
I make a quick comment on that.
Yeah.
So I talked to Tyler that night before that that Thursday night football game to get NO.
Yeah.
And then accepted my trade after the week, and then he put up like 4 points, and then he got cut.
Tough, and that's how it goes. I mean, Amaral, he's wheeling and dealing, and I was just talking to Simcoe about it. It's like he's kind of just invented the whole strategy of stockpiling a bunch of first rounders for one draft, maybe tanking a year, and he's really Amaral's kind of pioneered that vision, and I think a lot of teams are starting to follow suit and maybe copy that strategy of rebuilding.
Yeah.
So your team, you were 5th in points for, you were 1st in points for in your division. You outscored Zach by 90 points on the season. That's about 6.5 points a week. I think a big part of that was because you came on really strong in the second half of the season with, Justin Fields, his breakout. I think you can definitely call it. I mean, so he broke out week 7 against our Patriots. That was like the worst week ever for us, but it kind of played really well in your favor. He did miss a game from injury, and then he also did not play last week because of bye. So he's played in 6 games since that breakout. You're 5-1 since that breakout in games that he's played. You're averaging in those games 125.65 points per game. That would be, if you extrapolated that over the whole season, that would be the 3rd most points. You'd only be behind 2 Pins and Big Brain by about 4 points a week. Just to give you an idea of how much you've been scoring over that stretch. And that's the whole pretty much second half of the season. For, comparison, the Zits, they've been averaging 115.59 points per week since week 7. So since Fields broke out, you are averaging about 10 points per week more than Zach's team has. And like I said, over the course of the season, that was 6.5 points. So you've really been outpacing him in the second half. So kind of going into it right now, like I said, you're the slight favorite, and I guess I can kind of bring me to the question. We can kind of wrap up after that. But they say it's tough to beat a team twice, in a season, multiple times right now, right? So 2-3 times in general, it's very hard to do that. You are 0-2 against the Zits, but with your team's performance in the second half, and then injuries to key players on Zach's side, like Debo and Kenny Pickett, maybe not having a super flex in this, a quarterback to start in the super flex there. Do you feel like you're kind of primed for the ultimate revenge on Zach and to kind of right the ship after that 0-2 regular season and kind of get back at him when it really matters in the postseason?
So I wrote down the stats for our 2 matchups, and he beat me 109.66 to 107.72.
Yep.
That was when Mitchell got hurt, and also I played Russ because that was my main goal, was Russ to be my QB2. But it was a low scoring game, so it was like kind of a flip. But the last matchup we had, he beat me by like 2.3.
Yeah.
And that was without Justin Fields, like you said before. And that was with Russ putting up like 8.8 points. So if you add Justin in that week, it's possible that the whole division thing would have changed.
That really could have been the difference maker, kind of in this whole playoff picture. And that would be very interesting.
And then, it's honestly like this week, it was one of those where it's just like my whole team's healthy now. I lost Hollywood for part of the season. Godwin he started the season and then he got hurt again. So it's one of those where it's like my team slowly got healthy. I was hoping that Mitchell would come in and be my RB2. But the one trade that actually helped me a lot from Zach was the Latavius Murray trade. He's my RB2
Yeah, it's
right now.
gonna be, yeah. Without him, you really wouldn't have
I would
much of
have
a starting running back for that two spot. I guess you'd have to be starting what, Travis Homer or Marlon Mack again. You know?
I would be praying for Kenneth Walker to not be healthy right now and hope that Homer would hit.
Yeah, and you know, I think it really helps you too that Zach's dealing with injuries to guys like Damian Pierce. He's now
Yeah.
out, or he's highly doubtful. Debo Samuel, of course, went down. It sounds like he's going to be back for maybe the playoffs for the Niners, but I don't think he's going to be able to come back in time for any point of these playoffs. And then with injuries to guys like Stafford and of course Kenny Pickett, he had the concussion last week, so who knows? He was limited this week. I know Traylon Burks, he didn't practice at all after his concussion. So that was a bad sign for him, but at least Kenny Pickett is back at practice. But even then, it's like, Pickett's not lighting the world on fire. That's giving him 13, 12, 16 points over the last 3 weeks, where he was fully healthy. So Zach's just really, really thin at some of these positions. But then, of course, he could always have Jonathan Taylor just go off, Amon-Ra go off, Tyreek Hill go off, and those guys are capable of kind of carrying him to that win. Do you feel a little concerned if T. Higgins isn't able to go? I know that he was active last week, but he just wasn't really used much at all, or something like that, right? What didn't Zach Taylor say he was good to
Yeah,
go?
Zach Taylor had a thing where he was out before the game even started. He didn't tell anyone about it.
Yeah.
Luckily, that didn't cost me anything. I think the injury that would cost me the most if T. Higgins wasn't to go would be Mooney not being able to play, because Mooney would be the next guy up.
Yeah.
So my next receiver would be hopefully not Noah Brown.
Yeah, 'cause that's the thing, right? I mean, I don't see anything about Mooney coming back, right? He's still on IR. So who do you go with? I mean, do you go with Cole Kmet in that second flex spot if T isn't able to go?
Possibly, because when I did I relied on the Bears stack when Fields was going off and it paid off, but that'll probably be the next person up there.
And I think the big issue that you could run into too, and it's something to keep an eye on, is that T. Higgins, those Bengals, they play at 4:25. So Cole Kmet, he's playing at 1 o'clock. I mean, who else do we got? Noah Brown, he plays at 1 o'clock. Benjamin Snell, 1 o'clock. Travis Homer, he plays on Thursday. So it's like, you're kind of handcuffing yourself there, because it's like if you try and ride it out with Higgins, then all of a sudden you get a late scratch. It's like you possibly have to start David Bell or I'm looking Marlon Mack, and those are the options that you're kind of left with. So it's like you got to kind of hope that there are some, even if they're negative reports, you got to hope that they come out sooner rather than later on T. Higgins, because you don't want to be left holding the bag and then starting a guy that might get you to you'd be lucky to get 2 points.
5 points. Yeah, that's the last thing I have is you need to know, I'm hoping by Saturday night saying he's good to go. Hopefully, even if they tell me he is playing, if he has a snap count or anything like that. But it's one of those where Joe Burrow really favors one receiver, like we saw last year.
Yeah.
When I was big brain, he threw to T. Higgins 15 times, and I was riding high with that. And then the championship, he threw to Chase that 20 times or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where it's a luck of the draw. But if T. Higgins and Burrow both hit, I think I have a good shot this upcoming week.
Yeah, exactly. And that's always kind of like the boom or bust with the stack, right? Is that some weeks it can be a little underwhelming if they, get shut out or something. But then there are the weeks where, especially when it's Joe Burrow and that Bengals offense, if they can explode for 40 points, then all of a sudden those two can just carry you to a win. I think it'll be interesting to see. I think it's going to be, it's one of those, it's like an old NFC East battle or something, where it doesn't matter if one team's 10 wins and the other's 2 wins. It's going to be a close battle no matter what. And, who doesn't love seeing the Bones go head to head at it? So, we can call it at that. Mikey, thank you for coming on, and good luck in your matchup. We'll be hearing from the other team owners, that are also in the playoffs. We'll be hearing them putting it all on the show. So thank you for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Got you. Have a good one, Karen.
Yep. See you
later.
All right. We're here with Zach Bowen. He's the owner and manager of Gino and the Zits. Zach, the Zits, it was a strange season, right? Because I feel like, especially for the second half of the season, it felt like you were kind of just hanging on by like a thread. You went 10-4, you were seventh in points for, you were one Mikey Bowen went away from not even making the playoffs. Luckily he didn't pull it out. Spoiler alert, Mikey was on last night and he came with all types of stats. He made sure to let me know. He actually paused me. He goes, "Hold on, I got some stats too." He goes, "If I had Fields that week that I played Zach instead of Russell Wilson, I would have won." That's what he
Yeah.
got for me. So you're one Mikey Bowen went away from not making the playoffs.
He came with the numbers,
Yeah. Luckily you did make them. You put up 110.09 points per game. You were pretty steady throughout the whole season, really. It's not like you had peaks and valleys with it. I think a team like the Vibers you can look at and say that they really, really slumped in that second half of the season. You were pretty steady. You had your big weeks, you had your bad weeks, that type of thing. So you put up 147.2 points. That's about 200 less than what you had last year. Last year you put up 1,753.76. It is more though than what you had in year one, 2020. You had 1445.02. We'll get into 2020 in a second, actually more towards the end of it. You did pop off for 132.58 and 138.36 points in weeks 12 and 13. So there is a little bit of pop there. I know that there's been some concern with how your team ended the season, but I think you got to be feeling good there. Just looking through your roster real quick. Gino is really what saved your team, I think, right? Pickett, he's developing and he's not playing terrible. It's just that he's putting up like 10 to 15 points a game. He's kind of in that Mac Jones range where I was with him last year, trying to compete, but I didn't really have the quarterback play for it. And then Stafford coming off of the big season last year, just the elbow injury, then the spinal injury. It's been total mess for him. But Gino, he's managed to keep you afloat. He's a top 10 quarterback this year. I think that trade, that Jimmy G Gino trade, is something that we can always kind of talk about because I think it was so interesting with the immediate value versus the long-term value. Maybe Gino has that long-term value now, right? Running back Jonathan Taylor is not quite that RB1 this year. He is still RB16 points per game. Did miss a little bit of time there, but it seems like he's kind of getting it back. Maybe not putting up the monster numbers, but still, getting you, modest, 15 points per game, that type of thing. Jones and Dillon, I think you kind of had higher expectations for them. Overall, Jones, he's like RB9 on the season, which is strange because it doesn't feel like that. And then Dillon, he's had, 16 and 19 points, over the last two games. A little bit, your surprise pick, or not your surprise pick, but the pleasant surprise you've had in Dameon Pierce. He's been kind of slow down the stretch and now he's hurt, so you can't be playing him this week. And then, looking at your wide receivers, that's kind of your bread and butter right now. Active, which I think is the big emphasis on your receivers. You have Amon-Ra, Tyreek, and Olave. That's a powerful, powerful trio. I think that Debo injury, though, is devastating. The timing of it.
Brutal. Last week was sneaky brutal.
I know. And there's been a few like that in the league this year. I mean, two pins with Cup and just little things like that where it's like, or Kyler last week going down. It's terrible timing. And Debo, I think for at least the good news for your long-term outlook is that it sounds like he'll be back for the real playoffs, the NFL playoffs, but it sounds like he's safe to rule out for the entirety of our playoffs, which is brutal for you trying to make a run. I think the big interesting thing though is that, or I guess it's not that interesting, but with you being the 3 seed, right? You're guaranteed that if you do win, you will be playing 2 pins. So it's a very, very tough road ahead. Before we get to my big question and this big comparison, I want to feel how are you feeling about the roster? I think the Debo thing we just touched on a little bit, but overall, like I said, the kind of the shaky QB production, Jonathan Taylor not propelling your running backs quite like he was last year, and then losing Debo so late in the season. It's definitely tough sledding for your roster, but we also know that you're a team that loves to play in the mud. How are you feeling overall? Are you nervous coming into this? Do you kind of feel like this is where you thrive, being almost like the underdog like this? Overall, what's your general feel?
I mean, I like a lot of players on my team. Obviously, like I traded for pretty much everybody on my team right now, so I've obviously have. I didn't just stick with the team I drafted. I don't think I have one person that I originally drafted in the startup on my team anymore. But I feel like I have a lot of players on bad offenses or shaky offenses, like you were talking about, JT. Matt Ryan's the worst. Aaron Rodgers with the Packers, both my Packers running backs, has been terrible. And it's just led to a lot of inconsistency week in, week out. And it's hard to, when you're playing good teams, there's a lot of good teams. I think, especially this year, the league was top heavy. With like that core, you were saying it on the show all year, there was like a core like 4 or like 5 that were, always kind of much better than the rest. So when you're playing teams like that week in and week out, and you don't have consistency around the board, it's tough to win. Luckily, it was weird. That's kind of why my season was weird, is because I did win a lot of weeks going 10-4, but they were always kind of, I don't know if my points against was where it was in the league, but it felt really low. I think I just got lucky almost to be, like you stated earlier, probably pretty lucky to be in the playoffs if Mike Bowen had Justin Fields. I get it. It is what it is. But, just a very inconsistent year. I think all 3 years in the league, I've had inconsistent teams. That's kind of my thing. I don't know if it's a managerial flaw. It could be. Maybe I'm just destined for it. But, yeah, just inconsistency.
Yeah, and to go back to talking about that core 4, I feel like at the start of the season it was viewed as a core 5, and you were part of that. And then I think you slowly were just kind of falling out of that. And I think that had to do with Stafford not really playing that great to start the season, becoming injured. Yeah, he looked very washed when he was playing, and I mean, now they're talking about like he gets numbness in his feet and stuff like that. It sounds very bad for Matthew Stafford.
He has that Super Bowl. I think he has every reason just to take it easy.
Yeah,
I don't know. I have no idea what his future looks like.
But then also, Jonathan Taylor not quite being that RB1, and I think that was maybe a concern coming into the season with your team, right? Was one, it's almost impossible to go back to back RB1 overall. That doesn't mean he can't still be a top 12 guy. And I think that if you were playing maybe a full season, he didn't miss some of those games, he would have had more time to maybe catch up and do that. Still RB16 overall and points per game. And then, I think it's just like everyone on your team almost took a step back from being like crazy elite to just being good. Even, Aaron Jones, like I said, he's still a top 10 guy overall, but it hasn't really felt that way this year. AJ Dillon is
like you were saying, and it's kind of like one of those things with, I think going into the year, I think I actually remember talking to you and being like, if Aaron Jones finishes as RB10, I'll be happy. Yeah. But that was also with the thought that AJ Dillon would be like closer to that same range. So it'd be like, there'd be some nice value to have both of them. And it's just like, it's kind of like it's just inconsistent. Like Aaron Jones has great weeks. He had like a 30-point week, I think. Yeah. But he's also had weeks where he's just, either gotten banged up and got ruled out, or just didn't play a full like load because AJ Dillon had a few good games here and there. Just inconsistent.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing too is with Debo coming into the season, it's like, he was like RB or wide receiver 1, 2, top 3, something like that, right? But then it was like, in the offseason with his contract, there were talks about him not wanting to get those running back touches as much. And then, of course, halfway through the season, they bring in McCaffrey. So it's like he was like kind of due for regression too. And like he's clearly still great when he has the ball in his hands. He's still getting good volume. Of course, now it doesn't matter as much since he's injured. But it was just like your entire team was just like on fire last year, and with what they were doing, it's like they had like the golden opportunities, and then this year it's just it's tough to do that consistently. The interesting thing I think about your team though is that I'm kind of getting similar vibes to that 2020 squad that you brought all the way to the finals, because it's like I'm looking at it, and last year that year you were the 6th seed, but you were in that 3 versus 6 matchup, and it was against a division opponent. The G-Man was there. That was I believe that was a computer, or I think I operated that team at that point, just setting the best lineup that they had. And somehow in like the 6 weeks that I was running the team that way, I think I propelled them to that division spot. All I did was highest projected lineup every week. It was something else, really. And then you had that all-time upset of Big Brain, right? That was the first time we saw Big Brain crack. That was when they had that historic year 1. They still have. I was looking back at some of the stats, and that's still the record for most points for in a season. Both Big Brain and Two Pins almost broke that. I think they came within a point of that this year. So a little bit of a scoring boom from there up top. And then you lost McMorrow in the championship. But I think another big trend too is that so far there's never not been a Bowen in the championship because you were in year one, Mikey lost in year two. But that leads me to my big question, and then we can get off of this. So by now, right, it's well known that you should never underestimate the Zits. You don't want to be in that mud fight. It's a lot like the Lions, right, in the preseason, dragging them into the shallow waters and really suffocating them. But what are you doing to channel those vibes from 2020? But this time, right the ship and come away from it with a ring, because it's definitely going to take a little bit of a Cinderella story. I know you're the 3 seed, but it almost feels like the public perception is that you're almost the 6 seed in this matchup against Mikey.
Which is fair.
I think it's fair just based off of how the teams have been playing heading into the postseason. But what do you feel like you have to do to kind of channel those 2020 vibes and go on another Cinderella run?
First and foremost, and most important, believe in Gino. Watching him currently, not great so far. Ton of time left. But believe in Gino's one. Definitely going to need my elite players, Tyreek, Amon Rob, JT, to be elite. Need my good players to be good, stupid as it sounds, but I really do, because not having a second quarterback potentially this week or going forward, if Pickett, I don't know, he has 2 concussions on the year, and I don't know what my super flex looks like the rest of the way. So definitely interesting on that. So I gotta have my elite guys be elite and honestly get really lucky. I just don't think I have the horses this year. But you know who does have the horses?
Well, that would lead me to my question. I was going to ask, besides yourself, who do you have to win it? You think Big Brain's going to win it all?
Oh, Big Brain by 1.5 miles.
Yeah, it does seem to be the consensus around the league. I've been asking all the team owners, and it feels like it's either going to be, just based off of what everybody's saying, it's either Big Brain or it's Two Pins. I think it's on the slight edge publicly so far, but it's really just been those 2 teams.
I really say, I'll say Big Brain every year just because they're Big Brain. Favorites to win it every year. But it really is Two Pins until it's not. I mean, Two Pins has probably lost a handful of weeks the past 2 years. Never mind, they won last year and they've been by far the best team, I think, consistency wise and really in every sense. Last year, this year. So I think it's Two Pins until it's not, but Big Brain. It's Big Brain.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think in regards to your matchup with Mikey, I think it's a very winnable matchup for you. But of course, that guaranteed second round opponent being Two Pins, that does make it very tough for you. Compared to, and then after that, it's going to be either Simcoe and then Big Brain or Viber. So it's definitely going to be a tough run. We'll definitely take some luck, but I feel like that's part of any Cinderella story here. And I feel like the Zits are our resident Cinderella team. That's always the good bet for it. So, as always, I'm rooting for you. I'm wishing you good luck.
I appreciate it.
I'd love to see it, even though I will say my best timeline is for Mikey to win. That helps my draft picks out.
Villain arc, bro. That would be a incredible villain arc that you would complete.
But even then, I'm willing to root against my best interests for my pals. I'm no slippery Pete here.
Scumbag.
Zach Bowen, Gino, and the Zits. It was a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for
man.
your appearance and wishing you the best of luck in this postseason.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, I'll stop recording. Right now, did you hear that, the recording in progress thing?
Yeah.
I've always wondered, because I always say all right, we're going, and I've never found out if anybody's.
It gives you a little update. So
yeah. All right. Lex Lumpkin Show. We are here with Ryan Simcoe, Ryan Sim Salabim, Jimmer Fredette, all the names that you could possibly think of. He is the owner and team manager, formerly the co-owner, now the full-time owner of the Bussy Boys, the 2 seed in the Friends Who Gamble playoffs this year. 12-2 best record, winner of the Sprite Cranberry division, third in points for. That's at 1,756.99 points. Put you about 56 points back, about 4 points per week behind both Two Pins and Big Brain. Two Pins and Big Brain were actually only separated by 0.28 total points for. Not that that actually mattered too much in the seeding because Big Brain was a wild card team, but that put you at 125.5 points per game. Ryan, how are you feeling coming into these playoffs? That is not my one question for you. That is more just an introduction. How's it going?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, feeling good. I am a little bit worried about the Lamar injury, I will say, but thank God I got that bye, and thank God Big Brain doesn't have the clutch gene to secure the win against Wallace. That I think it was like week 13 or 12 or something like that.
Yep.
But yeah, that was huge because Lamar going out was a total game changer, and I with the two quarterbacks that I have, I think it just makes it so much. You need that like consistency between the two to get those points. So it's huge.
Yeah, I mean the Lamar injury is certainly big, and I think the big thing with your team is I feel like despite how good it's been all season, I mean at points in the season you were number one, right? In points four, you were like the runaway one seed for a little bit, all that stuff. And then I think it's probably if you look back, it would probably line up with the Lamar injury, right? So that happened at the beginning of week 13, couldn't really get much done there. So then the last 2 weeks, but that's certainly concerning. And then, I mean, you're also looking at part of your roster too, right? You had the Kyle Pitts injury. Not that that really mattered too much, just based off of what he was giving you for output. But also
Mr.
DJ
Shits.
Moore. Yeah, and DJ Moore being very disappointing too, because that was my thing with DJ Moore before the season, right? Pete's calling him a anytime 30, 40 points guy. He's never done that in his life. But the big thing with the most
Redacted,
appealing part to
slippery
the
redacted.
the most appealing part to DJ Moore was that he had like such a high floor, right? And all of a sudden that floor just seemed to drop out. And I think going into the season,
Yeah.
a lot of people thought that the addition of Baker Mayfield would actually raise it just based off of what he's had with the quarterback play. But yeah, it's like with your team, I just feel like everything is going so good and you've been putting up so many points that even when you're missing Lamar, you're still putting up a ton of points. But it just almost feels like you're like one bad thing away from complete disaster. And I feel like that's kind of just like how it always goes with your teams anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, even looking at it, right, like Saquon, he's been slumping over the last 4 games. He's at 10.02 points per game. He was looking like an MVP early in the season, even as a running back, which is so surprising. Even like the wide receivers too, right? Mike Evans, the last 5 games, he's averaged 6.56 points per game. DeAndre Hopkins, he's been great since he's come back from the suspension and everything, but now Kyler's down. He's going to have Colt McCoy throwing to him. And we saw he was still able to get good yardage, but it's like, I don't know if there's going to be the touchdown drives there for Arizona anymore. And then Keenan Allen, is kind of the bright spot for you. He's the last 3 games, 15.5 points per game. He's really seemed to kind of get over what was it, the hamstring, the groin, that injury that started with him, at the beginning of the season. What's like the state of like your players right now? How are you feeling about the starting roster? I mean, you've had to start Mike White, and J.K. Dobbins has made a little bit of a comeback. You do have options with like Thielen and Christian Kirk. What are you thinking for that super flex spot?
So I think it's been huge the depth that I've had throughout the year, but when it comes to the playoffs, it's mostly just like your starting lineup, right? So Mike Evans being on kind of a downturn has I think it could play a big role later on, but Keenan Allen bouncing back is huge. And then Josh Jacobs and Jalen Hurts are just so consistently great. Superflex, if Lamar isn't back, I'm not totally sure yet. I might have to go Thielen or another receiver or something in that spot because I don't know if I totally trust Mike White yet. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I was going to go to Jacobs and Hurts as well, just because they've been such huge producers for your team, right? Overall in the season, Jalen Hurts has produced 25.76 points per game. That's 21% of your points per game. Just from your starting lineup, right? I guess, and this kind of gets into my big question for you before we, really sign off. But these past 6 weeks, I feel like you've been in somewhat of like a slump, but it's like you've had like little peaks as well. So it's like, so I guess to get to my question, right? So even with a 156.78 point game in week 12, your team has been a little shaky, right? Coming down the stretch these last 6 games, right? You've averaged 125.5 points per game on the season. These past 6 weeks, even with that 156 point game, you're averaging 118.84 points per game in that stretch. Jalen Hurts in that same stretch is at 26.77 points per game. Josh Jacobs is at 21.83 points per game. That's 41% of that output in that time.
Yeah.
So does your heavy reliance on these two guys kind of give you a little concern heading into the postseason? I know you have the bye week. Hopefully Lamar can get healed up in that time. He's not practicing yet. But if Lamar's not able to come back, how concerned are you with just the fact that if you run into one bad game with Hurts or Jacobs, that could all of a sudden just tank your odds?
With Jalen Hurts, I'm not as worried about it because I think he's going to put up the points pretty much whatever because he does basically everything for that Philly offense. The Raiders with Jacobs, it could be a little bit different if they get into a negative game script. They might have to pass a little bit more, and he doesn't get as much touches. I don't know. It's tough, but I think that I have a lot of good players so that if Jacobs does have a down week, maybe Saquon has a good week, or there's other ways that I can make up for it. And who knows, maybe even Rico Bussey gets a start in the super flex spot this week.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think those are good points because it's like we said, we kind of ran down it with how much your players are slumping, and you are still putting up pretty decent output, right? 118 points is still fairly decent in terms of where our league's typically been with points per game, that type of thing. Even looking back, right? I think like the one bad game that stood out for Jalen Hurts this year was that Houston game, right? The Thursday night game where they were letting the Texans hang around for way too long. They seemed just like a little off, and he still put up 20 points that game. So it's like even if Hurts, who he's playing Dallas in the week of the semifinals, which will be your first playoff game, even if there is a little bit of a battle there, which against Dallas, he did have 16.9 points in the week 6 Dallas game, but even if that's like what he's giving you, you got to kind of hope that these other guys that have been slumping can pick it up. I think that's a scary thing about the playoffs, right? Is like no matter how dominant your team is, all it takes is you running into one shitty week where like you get no
Yeah.
touchdowns from your skill position guys and they're just giving you yardage and catches, and all of a sudden you're just putting up like 110 points and the other team just needs 115 to beat you or something. So it does get a
Yeah,
little bit scary.
especially with how the playoffs came in this league where like I think any team could really win it all or win or beat any team each week. I mean, Mikey and the Zits, like they have a little bit less points than the top four teams, but they have the players to beat anyone any week too. So anything could happen
Yeah,
really.
and that's what we've always said about the Zits, right? It's like you don't want them in that 1v1 cage match in the
Yeah.
playoffs. They can just pull you right into the mud and all of a sudden
Yeah.
getting suffocated with like 85 points. And
Gets real gritty.
and I think that's the interesting thing for you too, is like with how we reseed, is that there's a very things could really swing with just what the first round matchups are, right? Because obviously there's that one where it's Big Brain versus the Vibers, and then it's Bowen versus Bowen. And I think everyone would kind of agree that people are more scared of the winner of Big Brain and Vibers because going into it, you'd assume they'd be splitting the Bowens, pause. And and those two teams would advance, right? That would be like the on paper thing, right? Because those are the 4
Yeah.
and the 5 seeds. We all know that Zach, he's been putting up the low points per game when he was hanging on by a thread just to, get that division. He was in danger of even missing the playoffs if he choked that division lead away. No thanks to Pete, right? So I think it will be interesting just to see because who wins that Bowen versus Bowen matchup will really swing things because I think Mikey is maybe perceived as the stronger team just based off of some of the injuries to the Zits right now. Even though Mikey's dealing with a little bit of depth issue on his own. But I think Mikey's viewed as like a slightly stronger team right now. And if he could pull off that 6-3 upset, that really swings things with who you get, because you could go from getting either getting Mikey Bowen, or you could get the winner of the Big Brain and the Vibers. And I think that if you end up with those two, if Zach beats Mikey and you end up with those two, I think you're feeling a lot less comfortable, right? In that semifinal matchup. It's one of those where it suddenly gets very real and you're like, oh shit, like all these teams are good.
Yeah, it gets real quick. But I will say, even if I do draw Zach, I'm still, shaking in my boots because I don't want to get into that cage match with him. I don't want to get in the cages. It's anything could happen there.
Yeah. All right. I guess last one before we go. Any team but yours, who is your pick to win it all, but you cannot pick yourself?
Oof. I think, with Argentina going into the finals this year, it could be Big Brain's year if it's not me. I mean, they've been in it every single year, and if they lose in the first round again this year, they have to blow it up, right? They have to. You have to switch the energy.
It's just
It
because it's
gets
like one of those
embarrassing.
where it's like there's something there's clearly just like some hump that they're not able to get over. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's kicking Mitch out because that's what they've always talked about. They've talked about going 2-man team, Jeremy and Jordan, and then Mitch
Yeah.
could, maybe team up with Pete or try and find his own team or something.
Oh,
That's
Mitch
just what
and
they've
Pete
told him
would be
behind closed doors.
that would be awful.
Yeah, that's just what they've told me behind closed doors. I don't know how public that's supposed to be, but I don't know if it's a management blow up or if it's a player thing where all of a sudden they cash in on these running backs and try and do something. But I think the position that we're in right now is that it's the blow up's very tough right now because there's just it's almost a monopoly on some of these draft assets, right? I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
just with Pete having the top three, he doesn't have as much of a chokehold anymore because he doesn't have those two other picks. He went from having the top four, and then depending on wherever Bowen's pick ends up. So now it's a little more open, but I think it's going to be really hard to acquire draft assets, at least for the next 2 years. Amaral, I think he's got 4 or 5 picks. He kind of really engineered that strategy, right? Compiling a bunch of first round picks and and just looking ahead and maybe tanking a year. So Amaral, he's always kind of had that vision, and I think people are starting to follow suit with that. And because of that, that makes those first rounders a lot harder to get. So now I'll mark that down. Big Brain is your pick. I've been asking around already. You're the first playoff team that I've asked. I have been
Okay.
asking non-playoff teams, and I will say it's an interesting. There seems to be a bit of an overwhelming majority on some of these.
Really?
I don't want to say who it is though. We'll release that with the video or something. But all right, I guess that's everything. It was great to have you on. I think we should do this more
Yes.
often. Like I said, I really want this to be like an open forum for the league. Kind of like a players tribune type thing where if you want to write something, you can just ask me and then I'll gladly give you the password, let you on. You can write something on the blog. You can join in on the YouTube channel, do something like that. I want everyone in the league to get involved. I love seeing it happen. Everybody's so appreciative of it. And like I said, our ratings went through the roof this past month. I'm not really sure what changed with that, but all of a sudden
Yeah.
we're way up. And it seemed like engagement too was up. So that's
Yeah, it
always,
must just be a coincidence or something. I'm not
I
sure
don't really
exactly
know what the
happened there.
changes are. I'll have to look back and
Yeah.
see if I can pinpoint that. But thank you for coming on. This is Ryan Simcoe. This is the owner of the Bussy Boys and manager as well. Ryan, it was good to have you on.
It was a pleasure, and I'd love to do this again sometime.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. All right, we are here with two pins. We got both owners here. We got Dr. Joe Haneen. We also have George Two Pins himself. This is the 1 seed here, second straight season as the 1 seed. They are the defending champs after a dominant 2021 postseason. I don't necessarily remember how the regular season went, but you guys did obviously had a good one. You guys were the 1 seed back then as well. But last year in your 2 postseason games on the way to your championship, you beat both Bowens. In the semifinals, you beat the Zits 142.96 to 89.44. That's a complete blowout. And then against Mikey, he did put up a nice 143.06 points, but you guys put up a much stronger 168.54 points to crown yourselves champions. You led the league in points again with 1,812.8 points. That is about 0.7 points away from the overall record that Big Brain set in 2020. Something that Mitch did point out on my call with them is that they did have one less game back then. So I guess it does kind of bring those records into question a little bit, right? It's kind of like I was saying, it's kind of like the Cooper Kupp versus Calvin Johnson receiving yards, that type of thing. But 11-3 record. Over the last 4, you guys ended the season averaging 131.48 points per game. That's actually up from your season average, 129.49 points per game. I think another interesting thing talking about your points is that you guys were the second most efficient team in terms of setting your lineups. Mikey Bowen was the most efficient, starting 91.38% of his max points for. You guys were second at 88.63% max points for. To round out the top 4, because I think there is a little bit of a tier there, you'll see in a second why. Big Brain at 87.37 and then Slippery Pete at 86.14. I was saying to Big Brain, I think that the thing with that I think that contributes to that high rate, because after Pete at 4, it's the Vibers at like 83%, so that's a 3% drop off. So there's a pretty clear tier break there. I think that's like these are the 4 teams where your starting lineups kind of spoke for themselves. So, with Pete, of course, he just had nobody to start. So it wasn't hard for him to start the most optimal lineups every week. I think for you guys, it's a little more impressive just because of the level of talent that you and Big Brain and then Mikey to a certain extent have to constantly set that great of a lineup. But we'll start with that. Just overall with your team, how do you guys feel things are kind of shaking out? You made the big trade for Miles Sanders at the deadline, sacrificed a little bit of receiving depth, which maybe hurt a little bit when Cooper Kupp had the injury. But overall, I think this is the most well-rounded roster you guys have coming into the postseason. Dr. Joe, we'll start with you. How are you feeling about the roster construction overall?
Yeah, we have players that can play many different positions. We just got our head down. We're really watching the film. We're just focused. We're just moving on, trying to put our best foot forward. We really respect everybody. We're taking this bye week just like any other week. We're preparing. We're up at 5 a.m, getting quick lift in, practice, film study, team meeting, lift again, team dinner, which we don't normally do because we're usually lifting and working out. And during that time, that's obviously for the players. Me and George are scouting. We're on, I think yesterday we were on 2030 recruiting class because it's a dynasty league, not a redraft. And that's what a lot of people are forgetting. So I just want to reiterate that we're the number 1 seeds again. And I think that's partly due to us being so studious and looking at the future players. But if anybody has any questions, I mean, my email is always open. You guys can hit me up. Me and George, obviously, we're a team. You guys can hit us up, figure out what our tips and tricks are, and try to be as good as us.
George, are there any talks, and I'm kind of offering my team up for this, but are there any talks of this week maybe scheduling like a scrimmage match with another team in the league just to kind of keep you guys loose and maybe keep that competitive nature going and maybe not taking a week off and maybe rusting back on the bye week? I do offer my team up. Would you guys be interested in just having a scrimmage over this week, my team versus yours?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to get anybody hurt. I mean, we're kind of locked in, as Joe said, kind of getting prepared. We're already, we got to prepare for both teams that we could potentially play, and then with the reseeding, you pretty much got to prepare for everybody. So we kind of got a lot of work on our plates just with that, and then the scouting. So I think we're just gonna take it week by week, as day by day, as Joe said, and I don't want to risk anybody getting hurt. I did see Kittle caught a touchdown. So it's good to see him out there playing well, but it'll be good to get him back.
He should have around 20 points for you guys right now. Not that it counts or anything, but
that's the problem with our team. I walk away from the TV for a couple minutes, and all of a sudden, guy's scoring again.
I know, and we'll get to because I do have a question from you guys or for you guys as a fantasy owner myself, but we'll get to that in a second. Just a quick run through of your roster. Quarterback play is strong as ever. Mahomes, he's the overall QB2 on the season. Herbert, I'm not sure. I think he's cracked the top 10 at this point. He was, in that middle of the season, it felt like he was really just dealing with that rib injury he got in Kansas City, and then also just suffering from the effects of not having Keenan Allen, Mike Williams consistently in the lineup, anything like that. But with those two guys back, it feels like he's kind of figuring things out over the last 4, which, like I said, you guys are actually averaging higher than your season average. Herbert himself has had 21.39 points per game in that span. So it seems like he's kind of getting back to what's expected of him. And then that paired with Mahomes has always been, arguably the most dangerous quarterback duo in the Superflex league. Running back has always been the question for you guys, but I think this year's a little bit different, right? Of course, you have Miles Sanders. You made that trade for him. He's the overall RB10 this year. I think that there's kind of a misconception there about him getting touchdowns vultured. And sure, you could argue, yes, Jalen Hurts, a lot of his rushing touchdowns do come from, the goal line, goal to go situations. But at the same time, that's such a high-powered offense anyways that he's getting so many opportunities. Sanders himself still has 11 rushing touchdowns on the season. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's still a ton of rushing touchdowns. That's a ton of value. He's getting valuable touches, and he's really dominating the carries in that backfield. Gainwell, he's still getting, receptions here and there, spelling Sanders maybe on a carry or two, but that's Sanders' backfield. I think that offense is so good that you can't really concern yourself with Hurts being a rushing vulture or anything like that. I think that this is an instance where they're both coexisting. Ramondre, I think you guys are really benefiting from the bye week here because it gives Ramondre an opportunity to just let that ankle heal up. Of course, he left the game Monday night and then came back briefly before coming back out. We did see Pierre Strong look very good. My son, a slow stroke king, he looked great in what was essentially his rushing debut. He hasn't had too many carries this year, if any. He might have had one early in the season, but getting a chance for Ramondre to heal up and really come back for that second round matchup. And then Gibson too, right? Going into the season, everybody was so focused on Gibson, returning punts or losing carries to Brian Robinson. And he's kind of silenced the haters there, and he's still putting up a top 20 season and being very productive. I don't think his production has really fallen off from last year at all. So you guys really have, I think, your strongest running back core coming into the postseason that you guys have had in these last 2 years. George, do you kind of agree with that? I felt like you guys were really feeling the urgency to make a move for running back at the deadline. Last year, you got a lot of criticism for what you gave up for Gibson, but I think that you guys really nailed it on this one. How are you feeling about the running back stable right now?
Yeah, we feel good about it. I mean, I think that obviously it was something that a lot of people talked about. A lot of people wanted us to make moves, but Joe and I try to stay patient, throughout the season and just let things come to us, let things fall as they're going to fall. Obviously, we liked the Patriot pairing, the Patriot backfield coming in, and we were kind of planning on just rolling with that. We thought that the Patriots offense was going to be able to produce enough to sustain both of those running backs. And although Matty P is the ultimate offensive genius, he hasn't quite figured out how to sustain multiple players. So, we had to pivot a little bit there, but obviously, we don't look for injuries, but, with Damian being banged up throughout the year, that really opened the opportunity for Ramondre to kind of show his skill set as really an every down back. And then, yeah, we made that move for Miles Sanders. As much as anyone, Ayuk is somebody that we coveted for a while. You can ask Bowen. We asked him for almost a year, and then once we got him, we were very happy with him. And then, it wasn't easy for us to trade him to you, but yeah, we made that move for Miles Sanders. And similar to what you were saying, it was just kind of one of those things where we felt like he was kind of being undervalued still, despite his production, because you see, like you said, Jalen Hurts getting a QB sneak for a touchdown, but Jalen Hurts is like Adam Thielen; he always scores first, and then he lets his dog eat. He lets his dogs eat. So we never had any concerns about whether or not Miles Sanders was going to be able to produce for us. So yeah, we do think that this is a pretty deep core backs for us this year, and hopefully they can produce when it matters most.
Yeah, and then Joe, I want to ask you about the receivers because, like I was saying, the way that you guys are set up with your roster, it does feel like the starting lineup itself kind of chooses itself. It's essentially set in stone, right? And the only changes are really coming on bye weeks, and then of course injuries. And you guys did have one really big injury with Cooper Kupp, right? I don't know exactly what the status on him is, but I think it's pretty much safe. You guys almost have to operate under the assumption that he's not going to be with you guys through the entire playoffs. So if you guys are able to go on a deep run and make it to the championship again, I don't think he's going to be back in time for that. But the thing is, you guys are still so top heavy, right? You guys got Diggs, you have Jamar Chase, you have Devontae Smith, who maybe he's a little boomer bust, but he's still a top 20 wide receiver there. And then I think the big thing, talking about your acquisition of Sanders at the deadline, you guys made a very sneaky trade for Tyler Lockett at the deadline as well, and that's a guy that is consistently undervalued in fantasy, right? Because he's a virgin, he's old. And I think, because of his reliance on the deep touchdowns with Russell Wilson and everything, people kind of felt like he was unsafe, but he still consistently puts out these wide receiver one seasons. Joe, how are you feeling about that wide receiver acquisition? And how do you think that has really helped you guys in the absence of Kupp to stay so strong and put yourself in this position to go for the repeat?
Yeah, so I mean, with Kupp being gone, our motto has always been next man up. Whether Kupp comes back or not, I leave that to the team doctors. George and I know our place. We want our players to get healthy. Again, this is dynasty, not a redraft, so we want to make sure our guys are. I'm sorry, did you guys lose me?
No.
We're just making sure that our guys are healthy, and we want to put them in the best position for their future. We're not really worried about winning this next very week. We care more about our players than, they're actually human beings. They're our friends, they're families. They're not just players. So that's the biggest thing for us. But yeah, we've put ourselves in a very good position with our receivers. We, have just made sneaky moves everywhere. We brought in running backs, brought in receivers, but that's just, we're just trying to do the best thing for our team while keeping everybody happy and making ourselves a good run.
Well said. Well said. All right, we'll wrap it up. I just got one last question for you guys, and then we can hop off. So with a chance, right? You guys currently have the chance to become the league's first back-to-back champions in just our third year. I think that in itself is pretty impressive. But how do you guys manage to stay focused and continue to pump out this excellence where you guys could just rest on your laurels, kind of pull the Sean McVay, right? You won your championship, right? Just coast off of that for the rest of your career and maybe, retire early, get into broadcasting, that type of thing. But it doesn't seem like you guys are interested in that. It seems like you guys are still interested in keeping your foot on the gas and continuing to compete. So what is it that you guys do to just stay focused and continue to just kind of try and build this culture around your team that continues to just pump out this excellence?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd take this one first. I think, listen, we can admit that. Obviously, Joe's a doctor now. He just graduated this year. I was in grad school as well, 3.9 GPA Northeastern. So, obviously we're busy people, and I could admit that maybe coming into this year, we kind of potentially had that attitude. But then, one of your former co-hosts, now just elect show, great show, actually watch it every week, enjoy the content. He started talking and when you start having people that just are totally unqualified, just chirping you, gets them, get those competitive juices flowing again. And so I think, at least for me personally, I'm not a guy that tries to be driven by vendettas, but obviously, you want to make sure that people understand who the reigning champions are, and the standard that you're setting for your team. And yeah, there was just different people in the chats talking about this and that, and you mentioned our season, and I think that this season actually is a little bit better than last, just in the sense that we had Jamar go down for a little bit, and we were able to still sustain. We had Cooper obviously go out. We obviously had the QB bye situation, so we've had a couple of different adversities thrown our way, and we've been getting chirped through it the entire way, but we just stayed resilient, and I think that's something that kind of keeps us motivated, is just knowing that there are bottom feeders at the bottom of the league who, Stephon Diggs has scored more points than their entire team in a single game, and they're chirping us, talking about how we're setting our rosters or what we're doing. So that's always gonna, like I said, you don't want to be totally fueled and motivated by vengeance and vendettas, but it is something that'll wake you up every once in a while, and I think that was something good for us this season that definitely kind of got us back locked in.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite sayings. It's one of my favorite sayings.
No, I agree. That's actually one of those. That's my mantra as well. I do have that up on my vision board. And, I just want to say, I am speaking truly as a fan. I'm an avid two-pin supporter. I always have been. I've always trusted your decisions, whether it was trades or setting the lineup, anything like that. So, I just want to thank you guys for what you bring to the league. I think it's very inspirational. I think that we can all, sit back, take notes, and admire greatness, as it just presents itself in front of us. So, to you guys, I tip my cap. I bow down. You guys truly are Friends Who Gamble royalty, and it just feels like a dynasty that is in the works for years to come. So, I'm wishing you the best of luck. Personally, I'm rooting for a 2 pins versus Big Brain final. I feel like that is what's in my best interest for my draft capital. So I'm really rooting for that. I don't know if you guys have anything to add, but I just want to thank you guys for coming on and blessing us with your presence on here. It's always great to have you guys on.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that we kind of lived by last season, I mean, we won whatever, that's kind of in the past. We had 24 hours to celebrate. But I mean, as always, our favorite ring is always the next one. So that's where we're going.
And that's what I find so inspirational, right? Like you said, you had 24 hours to celebrate. I had the exact same 24 hours. I didn't celebrate at all. So the fact that you guys were able to win a championship and celebrate in that, and I did neither of those things, like that's what I just find so impressive, that you guys have the ability to do that and multitask, and George going and putting up an unbelievable GPA in grad school, Joe becoming a whole doctor, and then we got other bums that are just chirping from the bottom of the standings, like they know what they're talking about. I mean, hey, if we gave out championships for drafted first overall, some teams would be, everything would just be flipped on its head, right? But in this league, we play to win championships, and that's what you guys seem to do every season. So I find it inspirational. Like I said, you guys are royalty in this league, and what your word says is bond. So I trust you guys to really pull things together and really give it a good effort for the second championship run. But once again, thank you guys for coming on. We can call it at that. I'll stop recording now.